Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I hope you're doing really well wherever or whenever in the world that you are. Today I'm going to be doing a kind of wrap up end of year style video where I'm going to talk about all of the flops from the year. I'm going to talk about the DNFs, or the did not finishes that I had this year. Now there weren't very many. In general, I'm a bit of a completionist, but every once in a while, there's a book that the writing style's not for me. Right away, I know that the characters aren't for me. Or maybe it's just like a genre I'm not actually in the mood for. So sometimes it's more of a me thing and less of a book thing. But, you know, such is life. Sometimes DNFing is self-care. Sometimes DNFing is what's gonna keep you out of a reading slump, and so you gotta do what you gotta do. I had 7 DNFs this year, which is pretty good. I'm gonna go in the order of the years, like chronological order of books that came up, and then I put them down. So I'm gonna start with January. In January, I only had 1 DNF, but it was literally the first book that I picked up this year in 2022. I was like, oh God, this isn't gonna bode well. This is a bad omen for the rest of the year, but it turned out fine. That first book was War by Laura Thalassa, and this is book 2 in the 4 Horsemen series. And basically the premise is each one of the 4 horsemen, pestilence, war, famine, and death, like come down to destroy Earth and then fall in love with humans. So each horseman has its own book. I liked Pestilence, that first book. I thought it was a good time. War, on the other hand, I didn't care for. The short version is, it was a complete carbon copy of the first book. It had the same beats, it had the same tone, it felt like it had the same character archetypes as the first book, and so I just was having deja vu. It was like, is this scene not from the first book? And so that really put me off from the beginning. I also didn't really believe their chemistry. I just didn't buy that they were into each other. I also didn't like either individual character. War just felt like a knockoff called Drogo, and Miriam, I think her name was, she did a lot of things that annoyed me. Like, one of the things is I felt like she was using sex or sexual favors to reward War's like good behavior. I don't know, it just didn't land for me, and I really wasn't interested in the plot. I made it to 80% before I DNF'd it, and that was because I was literally falling asleep listening to it, and it wasn't at bedtime. It was like in the middle of the afternoon. There was a point where I realized I didn't even care where the story ended. I was just like, meh, I'm good, and I put it down. Like, I didn't even care about the smutty scenes. That's how little I cared. In February, I had 2 books that I did not finish. The first book was Return of the Dragon Queen by, I'm forgetting the author's name, but as always, you'll see it wherever it gets blooped up on the screen. I DNF'd this book at about 37%. This is book 3 in a YA fantasy series. Honestly, it read so young, it might be or should be middle grade, but you're following this 16-year-old girl who gets kidnapped, totally plucked out of the human world and plopped into this magical world where she learns that she has a really rare magical ability. She gets involved in these big, bad fantasy, typical plot lines, and yeah, you follow her through multiple books. The main character, Aurora, I was so sick of. This was the 3rd book, so I spent a lot of time with her, and I was waiting for her to start to mature and grow and become more thoughtful, but she just, through each book, continues to be this really impulsive, immature. She doubts everything about herself. The self-doubt and the insecurity, it was painful to read. And she also would do a lot of stupid shit, impulsive, would just kind of do whatever she wanted. She wouldn't listen to all of these wise mentors around her or people who would give her advice. She just would do her own thing, and it was incredibly dangerous and got herself into a lot of trouble. But then later in the book, she would be praised for her bravery. I don't know, it didn't land for me. It felt too young. I rolled my eyes so much while reading this series, and eventually I just stopped caring where the plot was going. So I DNF'd this 3rd book at 37%. The next book in February that I DNF'd was The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. And I was intrigued by this book because from what I remember, it was a marriage of convenience, or like an arranged marriage situation where I think the main female lead was being forced to marry the guy to bring peace or something like that. And I feel like it popped up on a ton of book talk fantasy romance lists that you have to read. So I thought I'd give it a try. I DNF'd this one at 34%, give or take. I think if you like a raging alpha male love interest, you actually might love this story. It might be perfect for you. I'm learning that as I'm getting older, that's actually a trope or a character type that I don't gravitate towards anymore. So right away I was like, oh, I don't think this guy is gonna be for me. I don't really care about him. I don't care about the relationship. And yes, I didn't give it a ton of time for him to soften or develop, but I just didn't really care all that much. I will say though, I liked Cam, the female lead in this book, a lot. And there was a pretty cool magic system where they controlled the weather. As I'm talking about it, I'm like, maybe I will try it again. I don't know. Oh, let me know. Have you read it? What'd you think? I DNF'd it, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I had no DNFs in March, and then in April, I had 2 more DNFs. The first book that I DNF'd was The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I think that's right. Again, you'll see it on the screen. This series was sold to me, and I think the pitch on Goodreads says that this is perfect for people who like Jennifer L. Armentrout and Holly Black, I think. I also feel like I was told that this was really for people who like Sarah J. Maas, which I do. And so I was like, okay, I'll give this a go. Nope. I DNF'd this at 20%. The narrator, like the main character, also reads very young, which is just not my cup of tea these days. And it was supposed to be enemies to lovers, but it felt very insta-lovey to me, which is like the opposite gist. So yeah, it didn't land for me with their romance and their chemistry at all. I also really hated the audiobook narrator. I even downloaded or purchased the ebook to see if maybe I would like it more, and I didn't. Oh well. The next book I DNF'd was The Queen of Attolia. And this book I really think was a me thing. I think I was just not in the mood. This is book 2 in, I forget what the series is called, but it's book 2. And book 1, you follow this guy named Jen as he's chosen to help, I think like a king, steal this ancient treasure. And so you're following them as they're going on this quest to obtain this object. And there's some crazy twists and turns along the way. It was really fun. I enjoyed the first book. I've heard from many people that the second book is better than the first, and that this is the book where the romance is introduced. If my hunch is correct, the main guy and the main girl have a meet cute at the beginning of the second book where something happens that in my opinion is kind of unforgivable. And so I know it's supposed to be enemies to lovers, but I don't know. I don't know if I could see like how one could get over it. Now, granted, maybe that's not who the relationship is between, but I feel like it is. If you've read the second book, let me know if it's worth me jumping back into, because I really enjoyed the first book. I've heard good things about the second book. Yeah, I don't know what it was. All I can remember is just not really being in the mood for this, so I ended up putting it down. Then I was cruising, and I didn't have any DNFs until October. In October, I did like a soft DNF of The Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is nothing against the book. I literally read 1 chapter, and I realized I just wasn't in the mood during spooky season to read spooky, witchy books. So I think I'll come back to this one maybe next year, or just maybe in one of those summerween readathons that Olivia Reads a Latte and Gabby, I think those are the hosts, they do it. So maybe I'll save that for a different time of year. And then the other book that I DNF'd was the Highland Conquest. If you watched my October wrap up, you heard a little bit about my thoughts with that. The short version is there's just too much aggro misogyny in the first part of that book, and I just couldn't get past it. It was not what I was in the mood for. And so I DNF'd that. Oh, let me see. I don't know how early on. Let me check my reading journal. How early did I DNF that one? I DNF'd it at 15%, so I didn't make it far at all. The last DNF that I had this year was in November. It was The Main Conquest by Shelly Laurenston. But again, if you watch my November wrap up, you'll know that I'm gonna keep trying with a different series with this author because I think I'm gonna like their stuff. This particular book was just a bit cheesy for me. Yeah, those are all the DNFs I had this year. It really wasn't very many. I think maybe next year I should be a little more mindful of when a book's not working for me, because this year I did have several 1 or 2 star books. And why put myself through a book that I really actively don't like just to see if it gets better at the end, you know? So I think maybe that's a personal goal for myself moving into 2023, is to be a little more forgiving and kind when a book's not working for me, and DNFing a little more often, because I really do think it's okay. Yeah, let me know your thoughts down below on DNFing. Are you a completionist like me, where you really try to finish everything that you start? Are you more loose with it and are really comfortable DNFing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or if you have any advice on how to help me be more okay with DNFing, that would also be welcomed in the comments down below. Yeah, I always get a good chuckle out of when people DNF or why people DNF. I don't know, I find it silly. So anyways, thank you so much for being here, for watching. If you're new, welcome. And if you're returning week to week, thank you. And I guess if you made it this far, go ahead and leave like that big red X emoji with any of the DNFs that you had this year. That's all for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.